Hello YouTube, it's Brandy. Thank you for coming back to my page. Today we are talking about gender, and I am excited, but I'm also a little bit scared because I don't want to misrepresent anything, and I want to talk about it in a way that is educated and empathetic. I also was nervous about it because I have never experienced gender dysphoria to a degree that I felt the need to change my identity. I am a little bit more androgynous. I don't look that way today, but in general, I am a bit more androgynous from a societal definition, because from a psychological standpoint, I have more conscientious traits at times regarding my work. Like, I'm a very hard worker and I'm very self-disciplined in my work. And that is something that is commonly associated with men in our society. I also think that sometimes I am aggressive, which might not be a good thing. But yeah, I get sassy sometimes, but I also am assertive and a leader, and I think that is commonly, I guess, geared towards men. I don't believe that men and women should be identified based off of their gender roles and their I don't believe that people should be confined to putting themselves in a box of what society would like to call them, whether that's masculine or feminine. I wrote a series of questions about gender that I had going into Christianity while I was struggling with sexuality as well, because these things have been very important for me to figure out, and I think that they need to become more important for the Christian community to think about and self-reflect on and figure out, because the way that we are talking about it is not educated and it is not kind. So that's what I would like to talk about today, and I hope you guys enjoy. Some probably won't, because they disagree with me on some aspects, especially like morality aspects involving gender, but some may enjoy it and see it as an opening for conversation, even if you do disagree with me. I know that I am not covering all areas of gender and answering all of the questions. That is just impossible to do in one video. Also, if you think that I'm missing out on something or that I need to address something, please let me know in the comments and I will respond, and I will get back to you and get back to myself and reflect on it. So the first question that I asked, or that people might ask in general, would be, is being trans equivalent to gender role rejection? AKA the tomboy conversation. And no, I don't believe that. I think that being transgender is an identity, and gender role rejection is personality. I think that is the main difference there. And I don't think that it is morally wrong to reject gender roles to a certain degree. You know, it's wrong if you're rejecting femininity to the point where you can't cry, or you can't be vulnerable, and you can't be agreeable, and you can't empathize. That is not okay, but I think that they are different. So the second question that I had was, do I think that being transgender is equivalent to role playing? And absolutely not. I do think that, like I said, being transgender is an identity, and role-playing is maybe doing drag or just presenting as more feminine but still holding the identity of your cisgender, like, sex genitalia. But also, this question can be, I can't believe that I am even addressing this, but people are using the argument that being transgender is the same thing as identifying with an animal or with inanimate objects because they feel that they are that. No, that is not the same thing. No. Yes, transgender people feel that they are the opposite gender, but the process of transitioning and dysphoria, or even not having dysphoria, like the whole experience is so different and heart-wrenching, and it is completely different than identifying with an animal or an inanimate object. So Christians, can we please stop using that as an argument? They are not the same. They are not equivalent. My third question is gender different than biological sex? My answer is yes, they are different. But I think that in an unfallen world, gender would align with biological sex. Now, how gender is defined, that's where it gets tricky. Because I would say that gender as in identity, like gender identity, identifying as a female, doesn't necessarily have to mean that you hold more feminine characteristics or traits. It just has to mean that you are not actively trying to reject who God created you to be by identifying in an act of defiance, or out of misery, like changing your identity out of misery and out of insecurity. I don't think that that is of God. And yeah, it has been shown that gender dysphoria is alleviated after the transition, but it has also been shown that depression and anxiety and other pathology rates have remained the same or actually have gotten worse. And even after transitioning, 19% of even an accepting population, aka Sweden, the study that I'm referring to right now, they still remain suicidal and deep in their pathology, or multiple pathologies, psychiatric pathologies. So I don't know. I think that gender and sex are different, but I don't think that rejecting your biological sex out of pain or rejection of God or rejection of traditional values is okay. I don't think that that is moral. The next question that I have was, does trans equivocate to being gay? And also, what is defined as being trans and gay? So the first question, does trans equivocate to being gay? Oftentimes it does, but not all the time. And sometimes people who are trans identify with, being bisexual or being pan or anywhere on that spectrum of attraction romantically and physically, and they can even lie on the asexual spectrum. So I am not rejecting that. And in a societal definition of what being trans and gay, what that would mean, would be a trans woman, so a biological male who transitions into a woman, being, romantically or physically or both attracted to women who are either biologically women or trans women. But also, it's important to take into consideration that society sees trans, like transgender, as an umbrella term for non-binary, for any gender identity that does not align completely with their biological sex. And you know what? That is from my research, but I don't know, like there might be a more elaborate definition that you guys would like to expand on. Mention it in the comments and I can respond and figure all of that out. So that's what sort of society would see as a trans gay woman, and they would also see the woman who they are attracted to being biological or trans. However they choose to define, they still see them as a woman. So the next question is, where is biblical gender identity aligning with biological identity found in the Bible? And I think it's found, well, all throughout the Bible. So in Genesis 1:27, where God actually created male and female, it's specifically stated there. And then in Matthew 19:4, whenever the disciples are discussing with Jesus about marriage and what that looks like, he brings up that humans were made male and female. So people who claim that there are gender non-binary terms in the Bible, like Elohim, and they claim that that indicates that God is non-binary, that does not make sense because Jesus refers to God as the Father, which was a masculine term written down in Greek. It's just important for us not to make up our own minds about what God is, but actually rely on the historical text that we have about who God is. And yes, I do believe that the Bible is a historical text because it actually has more reliability than thousands of other ancient texts, including, the Iliad and the Odyssey. So look into that. That's interesting. Look up historical Christianity. You can be educated and be a Christian who is not progressive. That is possible, which is something that God is Gray, a popular progressive YouTuber who I used to love, and actually, wrote a song for her, and a girl who she did an interview with named Melissa. I wrote a song for them talking about sexual abuse in the church, and Melissa replied, and I was very grateful for that. I thought that was very sweet. But Brenda never replied, and didn't reply throughout my entire journey of figuring out sexuality and letting her know where her theology had actually separated me from God and just hurt me deeply. So anyways, so why would trans be considered a sin? This is the next question. It's the same question about sexuality that I was asking. It's a question of God's character, and really it's not entirely known. I mean, straight people are just as likely to get STDs as the LGBTQ plus community, but somehow the LGBTQ plus community have higher rates of it. So that's interesting. And also, the LGBTQ plus community has a higher rate of divorce and families dysfunction. So that's worth looking into. But regardless, believers who are wrestling with God's character, they are still saved. Like, they're not just automatically exempted from the kingdom of heaven because they're trying to figure this complicated topic out. It is not simple, and we need to stop saying that it is simple. So what we do know though, through that process, figuring out how God defines gender and like how we are supposed to participate in our femininity and masculinity and how we are supposed to identify. What we do know during that process is that Jesus' love is enough and it is satisfying. And in whatever place we are on this journey of understanding, he's going to be patient and kind, regardless of how frustrated we are with him. So I know from a non-Christian perspective, they're looking at me like I have 8 heads, but you really don't understand the love of Christ and the satisfaction of that love and the peace and stability that comes from that love until you have that experience of revelation and of salvation and go through sanctification. Like, this is alien language for people who do not identify with Christ. Yeah. So my 7th question is God non-binary? Like I said earlier, I don't believe that God is non-binary. Jesus made it very clear that God was his father. And I think that Elohim, being a non-binary term, describes spiritual beings in the Bible, but when referring to God, I think that Elohim is referring to the Trinity. So 3 persons within one being or one essence. So I'm thinking that that is where the plurality comes from in that term. So the 8th question is, do intersex people exist and do they matter? Yes, they do exist and they do matter, and we need to talk about them and not ignore them. And we do need to realize that intersex is a myriad of conditions, and most of those conditions are displaying definitive phenotypes, which just means that their phenotypes, how they are presenting physically, are not ambiguous. Like, you can tell if it is female genitalia or male genitalia. But there is a very small portion of that population who has ambiguous genitalia, who has both male and female genitalia, and we need to address them and not ignore them, please, because everybody who I've asked about it in spiritual authority has not given me satisfactory answers, nor have they given me empathetic answers or educated answers. So we got to get better with this. I think that with intersex people who have both genitalia as a phenotype, I think that that is defined by the medical community as a disorder, not a disease. But I also think that people experiencing gender dysphoria are experiencing mental pathology, are experiencing a mental disorder. And so I think that it is not out of ethical bounds for an intersex person to choose to identify as male or female, or even both, maybe. I'm not really sure about that. But I think that trans people identifying through rejection or through dysphoria is not ethically sound. And I think that, like, working through that insecurity and presenting however you would like through gender roles, but not necessarily putting your identity in the opposite gender and drawing closer to who you were created to be, would make the most sense from a biblical standpoint on morality. Now we're going to get into talking about how the church has been handling it. It's been awful. So bad. Because people are uneducated and because people are not talking to trans people and understanding their experiences. So, next question. Are trans or LGBTQ plus people invading the church or invading society? Are they impeding on you? And then we're also going to talk about pronoun usage and harm done by the church within this question? My answer is no. They are not invading your life or your church or whatever. Like, that is not how you should be viewing them. That is not a view that comes from love. They are not invading or impeding on you by existing and making their existence and their gender discovery known. That is... Now, if they are aggressive about you disagreeing on the morality of transitioning, that's another conversation. I do think that that is not cool, but I think that our empathy within that and understanding that they are being aggressive because of the pain that the Christian community has caused them over years and years is really, really important to take into consideration. Because these young people struggling with gender dysphoria are coming to pastors, and these pastors are telling them that their feelings are invalid, and they're leaving them feeling invalidated and with their struggle with identity, instead of telling them where identity could lie and about healing from gender dysphoria. And this is producing fear in some people and also rejection in other people. So it's producing fear in people struggling with their gender identities within the church, which is not good. They should be able to talk about those things openly and have a conversation filled with grace and with compassion with their spiritual leaders. Or, rejection. So they completely reject the idea of Christ and the church because it does not align with what they think is morally apt for their identities. So, why are people remaining deeply in struggle with anxiety and depression and other pathology even after their transition? I think that is something that could be brought up whenever someone is struggling with gender identity and asking their pastoral guidance if transitioning would help with these things. I think the appropriate answer would be maybe to a degree, but in a generalized observation in an area that is widely accepting, people are still 19 times more likely to struggle with suicidality and their previously held pathologies. So yeah, I think that is the conversation that would be healthy to have, but telling them that they aren't worth your time talking to and that their feelings are invalid are just not acceptable anymore. And the whole bathroom issue and calling people snowflakes or referring to gender dysphoria and gender identity struggle as nonsense, whoo, that gets my blood boiling. These people have no idea the pain that these people are going through trying to figure out where their identity lies, using flippant language about it and not really caring about these people, only caring about their own agenda of being right about biological sex aligning with gender identity, but not really even knowing how to define gender identity in a biblical sense. Because people all throughout the Bible, David, for instance, and Solomon were stereotypically very feminine. Jesus was very stereotypically feminine, but they still identified with their biological sex. So I think that would be a good direction to take that in. The bathroom situation, you know what? This is a free country for people who are religious and who are not religious. And the majority of trans people who are using the restroom are not trying to hurt anybody. They're not pedophiles. They're just trying to use the bathroom and feel comfortable. So that conversation, just stop. No, that we are in a free country. People should be able to use the bathroom in which they choose to use. For real. I mean, I don't even know how that's a conversation. And then finally, why am I even making this video? I'm making this video because I am told to be honest, and I'm told to share my findings with the world, my Christian community, and with my non-Christian community. And the last question that I have is it judgmental to tell trans people that they're identifying based off of their gender is not righteous to the Christian God? Is that judgmental? Societal answer would be yes. Obviously, they would think that that is judgmental, because they believe that sexual morality is subjective in regards to gender identity and same-sex attraction. They would believe that that is subjective, and people can believe that it's right and people can believe that it's wrong, but there's no outcome or punishment or consequence regardless. Now, from a biblical perspective, no, because Christians believe that sexual morality and identity boundaries are objective and in the Word of God. And really, a verse about rebuking that I would like to refer to, explaining why I'm making this video and why it's relevant, is Matthew 18:15-17. And it instructs to rebuke in private first. So I have rebuked certain people like God is Gray and like certain affirming people in privacy, and they did not respond, nor did they listen, obviously. And then it says if they don't listen, take a couple more people to do that. And there have been more people than just me correcting God is Gray on this, and other progressive Christians who are big on the Christian platform. So I'm not the only one. And then if they don't listen, then tell the church, which is like what I'm doing right now. The church is the body of Christ. So yeah, I'm telling you guys right now that it's not biblical to identify with a gender that out of rejection and out of dysphoria. And then if they don't listen to that, if the church doesn't listen to that, or the people who claim to be of the church and they don't listen, like God is Gray, she claims to be of the church, but she's not listening, then we are called to actually separate ourselves and see them as Gentiles and tax collectors, or our spiritual enemies. But we are also called to love our spiritual enemies and pray for them. So I do love Brenda, but I think that she has a lot of self-reflecting and also stories to listen to, other than Jackie Hill Perry. Like, I know she did like a 5-minute interview, 10-minute interview with Jackie Hill Perry, yet she spends countless hours talking to people who agree with her viewpoint. So yeah, we need to be talking to everybody. And at this point, I feel like I've talked to everybody who I have had the opportunity to actually engage in conversation with. And I've been engaging with the LGBTQ community from a very young age, because I was a part of it and I was never ashamed of it until I came to Christianity. Although I'm not really ashamed of it now, I just choose not to participate in it because I don't want to be displeasing to God, because I love God more than I love the idea of marrying anybody on this earth or loving romantically anybody on this earth, whether they are male or female. So yeah, that's where my head lies on it. Like I said, comment, tell me if you disagree. We can have dialogue about it. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.